ground shook, the sky split open, and fire rained from heaven, hotter than anything men had ever seen. Screams pierced the night, houses vanished, statues melted into ash, and in the chaos, one woman looked back, one glance, and she was gone.
Sodom and Gomorrah. A valley so green it looked like paradise. Nestled near the Jordan River, between hills and trade routes, stood Sodom and Gomorrah. These were not primitive places. They were thriving. Silk from the east, spices from the south, gold from the mines, fruit from the vines. Merchants shouted in open-air markets. The smell of roasted lamb drifted through the streets. Music poured from balconies. They had everything. Laughter roared the street. Women danced in entertainment. They partied before their gods, but beneath all their glitter was rot. The people of Sodom were proud, not the kind of pride that lifts a community, but the kind that believes it needs no one, not man, not heaven, not even God. Their hearts grew cold. When the weak came knocking, they only opened doors of wickedness. The hungry were mocked, the poor were turned away. And travelers, foreigners, were humiliated and used for amusement. It was a place where power ruled, where the rich took whatever they wanted, including people. Men chased every desire without restraint, lusting after their fellow men. Greed and violence was their source of joy. Hospitality, once sacred in ancient culture, became a joke in the land. If a stranger came to the town, the mob would surround his home and demand him for their lustful pleasure. Women were objectified, innocence was trampled, the concept of family was twisted, the idea of repentance mocked, and those who spoke of justice were either silenced or made object of amusement. Their sins were not hidden. They were celebrated by all. Sin wasn't a stumble, it was a parade. They felt they were untouchable and had everything they desired. God was watching, and the day of reckoning was already on its way. In the shadows of all that wealth came wickedness and suffering. Women were beaten, strangers were stripped, children wept in silence. The streets that once welcomed life now swallowed innocence, and the cries reached heaven. God heard the voices of the broken, the violated, the forgotten. He saw the coldness of hearts and the wickedness done without shame. And the Lord said, I will go down. I will see for myself whether this outcry is as deep, and if not, I will know. God went to a man who has always been faithful to him, Abraham. In the quiet hills above the valley, Abraham stood face to face with the Almighty. And when Abraham heard of the judgment coming to Sodom and Gomorrah, he pleaded, not for himself, but for the people. Lord, if there are 50 righteous, will you spare the city? Yes, God said. And Abraham asked again, what about 40 people would you spare the city? God again answered, yes. Abraham went on, 30, 20, 10. If there are 10 righteous people in Sodom, I will not destroy it, God said. Abraham bowed his head in reverence. That evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills, two strangers entered the gates of Sodom. They dressed and came in form of men, cloaked, quiet, looking tired from travel. But they were not men. They were angels, sent from heaven on a final mission to see if anything in Sodom was still worth saving. As they walked through the city streets, eyes followed them, curious, hungry. Faces peered from windows, whispered laughter echoed in alleys. They had not even reached the square before danger found them. And just then, Lot, who was Abraham's nephew that lived in the land of Sodom, came to rescue them. He was a man who still remembered right from wrong, a foreigner in the land. Lot, despite living in a corrupted city, remained upright. Lot had lived in Sodom with his wife and 2 daughters, and had prospered in the land. So, when Lot saw the strangers, he knew they were in trouble, knowing how corrupt the men in the city he lived in were. They displayed their lustful wickedness without shame. "Please," Lot said urgently to the angels, "come to my home. Stay with me, have a bath, eat and rest." He did not know they were angels. At first, they refused. "We will spend the night in the square," they said, but Lot persisted. Then they finally agreed to follow him to his house. That night, before the house lights dimmed, the city stirred. A mob gathered, loud, drunk, laughing. Men from every corner of the city came to Lot's door. "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, so we may have them and pleasure ourselves with them." They laughed. Lot stepped outside, slammed the door behind him. "Do not do this wicked thing," he begged. "They are my guests." But the crowd roared. "Who are you to judge us? Move out of the way or we'll do worse to you." Lot continued to plead with them, and they grew even more angry. "Please take my daughters, but do not harm the men. They are my guests." Lot pleaded, but their response was, "Bring out the men." Lot was still pleading with the crowd when suddenly the door opened from behind him. The strangers reached out, pulled Lot back inside the house, and in an instant struck the mob with blindness. Screams filled the street. Men stumbled, clawed at walls. They fell and stumbled into each other. But even then, they kept reaching for the door. That's how decayed their hearts had become. Inside the house, the angels turned to Lot. Their faces were no longer hidden, their voices clear, sharp, and thundering now. "You must leave. Take your wife, your daughters, because tonight this city will burn and fall. You must leave, now. Get out and do not look back." Lot stood frozen, his heart still tied to this place, his home, his memories, his comfort. He tried to hesitate, so the angels grabbed them. Lot, his wife, his 2 daughters. The angels pulled them by the hand, dragged them out of the city, through the gates, into the open fields. The sky was silent. The stars were still as they continued to flee far from the home they knew. And then, back in the city of Sodom, suddenly, everything changed. The ground shook. The air cracked with light. The cloud rumbled, this time not with rain but fire. And suddenly, heavens opened, and from the heavens fell fuel, not flame as we know it, but something hotter, brighter, wrath that had waited too long. Brimstone poured down like molten rock. The skies burned red. Screams pierced the night. Houses vanished. Temples collapsed. Statues melted. Trees became ash. Lot and his family were still running to refuge. But behind Lot, his wife turned. Just one glance, one silent refusal to let go. Perhaps to have a last glance at the city she's built her life in, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Lot kept running with his daughters, tears streaming. They could not stop, because everything behind him was gone. After a long time of fire downpour, the fire faded. The skies grew still. All that remained was smoke. Abraham stood on the ridge where he had once bargained with God. He looked down into the valley where a bubbling city once stood, but there was no city anymore. Just ash and silence and the memory of what was. Sodom and Gomorrah weren't judged just for sin. They were judged for pride, for arrogance, for lustful act without shame, for cruelty to the poor. They were judged because they caused suffering in pride, because they had power and used it to exploit, because they had the chance to change and chose not to. What happened to them was not sudden. It was earned. And when mercy ran out, judgment came. If this story moved you, share it. In our world today, what does this story reveal to you?